David?
Well, I've not had the pleasure of seeing the Queen eat popcorn. Nor is she liable to make a commercial saying, if you're only going to see one royal film this year, see the King's Speech. We do know it has shown at Buckingham Palace to the household, that is to say the private secretaries, the equerries, the courtiers, and they loved it, and I was not there, but I was told that Prince Charles's private secretary at the end of the screening said, "Bloody good show." When you're writing about a recently reigning monarch of England, you've got to be a little careful. So obviously, I felt there was a great burden upon me to be as historically accurate as humanly possible. Sure, liberties have to be taken. We're making a film, not a documentary. The greatest liberty I took was similar to yours, the compression of time. The relationship between Logue and Bertie was over a very extended period, which makes for kind of a flappy movie. I've noticed doing a lot of biopics that people don't have the grace to live their life in a good three-act very messy. But I tried, you would be surprised how many lines in the film are actually direct quotes. A great deal of them. We get sometimes criticized for things that seem too good to be true. Some critics have said, well, it's absolutely nonsense that the Queen was sitting on the King's stomach during his breathing exercises. I've got to tell you folks, that's exactly what she did. The scene where, right at the eve of the coronation, Cosmo Lang, the Archbishop of Canterbury, discovers that Logue is not a doctor, has no credentials, had no formal training, and wants to replace him, and he stands up to him, that really did take place. It was not the last night before the coronation, but it was during the rehearsal period. It did take place. The techniques, I mean, the greatest challenge I faced was, of course, the gut of the film. It's two men in a room, and nobody else was in the room with them, and they're both gone, so I can't interview them. So it had to be educated surmise. But it wasn't a terribly difficult problem, really. Although I could never prove that Lionel Logue read Sigmund Freud, I knew intuitively he had to be using the talking cure. And surprisingly, I got to prove that in an extraordinary way. I have a very elderly and eccentric uncle in England, also named David, also a former stutterer. And in the early stages of this project, when I was trying to do it on my own nickel, he would let me use his flat in St. John Wood as a pied-à-terre. And he became familiar with the project. He asked to read the screenplay, which I gave him. And one day he said to me, that fellow in your project, Logue, isn't his name? I said, yes, Uncle. You read the screenplay. His name is Logue. Australian, wasn't he? I said, yes, he's Australian. Yes, I saw him for years as a lad. I said, what? He said, yes. Your grandfather, my father, wanted me to be treated by the King's Speech Therapist. So I went, I said, but Uncle, why didn't you tell me? What went on? What were the consultations like? What was the treatment like? He said, well, I didn't mention it because it was rubbish. Absolute nonsense. The man didn't know anything. He was an Australian gangster, just taking money. All he wanted to do was talk about his childhood and his parents and get me to talk about my childhood and my parents. I said, yes, but David, you don't stutter anymore. I said, yes, but I would have outgrown it, wouldn't I? So, if you know that one of the people in the room is using the talking cure, and if you've read everything conceivably written about the patient, which I had done, obviously, it's pretty easy to figure out what they're going to be talking about. So I feel confident that, you know, can I say that those were the exact words they used? Absolutely not. But is that probably what they were talking about? Yeah, I think it's a pretty good guess. So that was how I was dealing with that.
So Carl, you were basically